Controversial legislation, lawmakers stepping down, how big developments from 2017 are shaping this year's outlook in Texas politics.
I'm Anna Warnicki at the White House. President Trump has invited lawmakers here to talk about immigration. I'll have that story coming up.
Good morning and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. President Donald Trump invited Republican lawmakers to the White House to talk about next steps on immigration. The president says he wants money for his border wall, but Democrats say they are not on board unless the plan includes a replacement for DACA, the program that allows undocumented immigrants who arrived in the U.S. as children to avoid deportation. Anna Wernicke is in Washington with what's next.
Making a lot of progress on a lot of different things.
President Donald Trump told Senate Republicans the next bill he'd like to see this year is an immigration plan.
We need protection, we need the wall, we need all of those things.
The president says he wants funding for a border wall and immigration enforcement. He also wants to change family-based immigration and end the diversity visa lottery.
A lot of Democrats agree with us. When they see what's happening, when they see the kind of problems we're having at the border, they really understand it. Whether they'll vote that way is another situation.
The president continues to invite lawmakers to the White House to talk about immigration, but the administration admits it'll be up to Congress to find the ultimate solution.
Coming from a border state.
But Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn told the president any immigration package needs to include a replacement for DACA, which is set to expire in March.
My constituents in Texas all understand the importance of border security and enforcement. At the same time, they're people with big hearts.
This must be done now.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says he's willing to negotiate a respectful immigration plan if keeping the nearly 800,000 undocumented people in the U.S. under DACA is part of it.
Every morning they wake up with a pit of fear in their heart that they will be deported, separated from their families.
Everybody's got to give a little bit, but I've never been more optimistic about an immigration reform proposal making it to the president's desk.
The White House says President Trump plans to sit down with Senate Democrats next week. In Washington, I'm Anna Warnicke.
As you heard, there are nearly 800,000 Dreamers currently in the United States. That count comes from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Of those, close to 124,000 live in Texas. For perspective on the DACA debate, we're joined by Brian Smith, an Associate Dean and Professor of Political Science at St. Edward's University in Austin. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
Sure. 124,000 Dreamers in Texas. Who are these people?
Well, these are people we see every day in Texas. These are people who came to the United States as children. These are Texans. They've gone to Texas schools, might be in Texas universities, or working at jobs in Texas. But the problem is they're here without permanent legal status.
Well, the president is pushing funding for a wall right now. Is this how Trump gets Congress to pay for it?
Well, originally he wanted Mexico to pay for it. That's out. But he wants Congress to pay for it and wants the DREAM Act, or at least the Dreamers, to be part of the package deal. The problem, of course, with the wall is there's a big continuum of, is it a virtual wall or is it something more like a permanent, huge wall? And that's where the debate lies.
What's the likelihood that he's going to have success there?
Well, one of the things is there's a lot of things for the Republicans on the table other than the wall. So if they don't get the wall, which may not happen, the president could still push the immigration visa lottery. He could push chain migration as things that he wants. So he wants at least a down payment on the wall. Whether he gets that or not is up to the Congress.
Yeah, what kind of impact could the things that you just mentioned have?
The chain migration?
Yes.
Well, one of the things is those are much smaller than the wall in the sense that that could be done legislatively, that you could write legislation to end the chain migration and the visa lottery, and that could go into effect pretty easily and probably wouldn't have a big impact overall on the total immigration problem that America faces. But the Republicans and the president could say, hey, we campaigned on this and we've done it.
How fair is a visa lottery?
The visa lottery is not necessarily fair or unfair. It's just what it is. It's to encourage people from countries that do not usually send people to the United States, immigrate to the United States, give them a chance to get citizenship, kind of jump the line to encourage some diversity. And the Republicans don't like it because one of the things is they say it encourages terrorism, because that's one of the reasons these people are not coming to the United States. They don't want to be here.
You know, our own Senator, Republican John Cornyn here from Texas, he has said Texans want the wall, but they also have big hearts. These two things kind of clash.
Right. This is John Cornyn's problem. He's going to be one of the people that needs to broker the deal, and he's facing both ends of the spectrum. A very Republican right that says, you know, DACA is amnesty, plus a Republican right that says, hey, build the wall, but also the idea of Texas is at the front of any immigration battle, and these are people who are here in Texas, and they're his constituents. So he needs to deal with both of these, and he's going to have a hard job doing it.
Where do you think there are areas for compromise?
There's definitely areas for compromise because everybody knows our immigration system needs reform. So it's not one of these things where one party says it's great, the other says it's not. Both parties say there needs to be a fix. Second thing is both parties understand that the DREAM Act, the DACA, that this is something that is probably a good policy because these are people who are here in the United States already and have been here for a long time. So there's some compromise there. Also, some of the smaller fixes are compromised. The big battle, of course, is the border wall. And what does it look like? How much is it going to cost? When does it go into effect?
You being a university professor, is this something that you and your students talk about?
Students are very interested in DACA because at St. Edward's and at all universities, these are kids who've gone to Texas high schools or enrolled in Texas colleges. So these are people who are probably in my class every day and are working just as hard as everybody else. So we need to give these people a chance.
All right. Brian Smith, thank you for being with us.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Fallout from some of this policy implementation we're going to see happen and begin to take place in 2018.
2017 is over, but the topics that dominated the year in Texas politics are not done. How they're shaping the debate in 2018. A local community clinic waiting on Congress. How uncertainty in our nation's capital is impacting patients right here in Central Texas. Uncertainty and instability. That's how leaders of community health centers in Texas are describing their industry since Congress hasn't passed long-term funding they need. Lawmakers hope to tackle the issue now that they're back in Washington. KXAN's Steffi Lee takes a look at what's taking so long.
We are a full-service primary care practice.
People's Community Clinic in Austin has it all.
We are really meeting a basic human need for primary care.
A poster in CEO Regina Rogoff's office outlines the center's vision, but it needs support from Congress to continue.
We all need that infrastructure.
Lawmakers only passed short-term funding for these federally qualified health centers through March. Rogoff says if multi-year funding isn't approved beyond that,
it would make a big dent and it would make it hard to continue delivering services at the level that we currently do.
Texas Association of Community Health Centers Executive Director Jose Camacho says inaction in Congress means inaction here at home.
They're delaying the decision to hire. They're delaying the decision to add more staff. They're delaying decisions to expand buildings and services.
He points to the high demand for behavioral health, drug, and alcohol abuse services.
That's been laid at the doorstep of health centers.
But says provider recruitment and expansion projects will likely remain on hold until there's a promise from lawmakers.
We had hoped for 5 years. At this point, I think we would settle for 2 years.
Steffi Lee, KXAN News.
We want to give you a better idea of how many providers are affected by the recruitment delay. Health centers statewide typically employ around 600 doctors. The Texas Association of Community Health Centers says 66 provider positions need to be filled right now. Election day is less than 2 months away, and that's putting a lot of pressure on candidates preparing for the primaries. We'll look closer at the challenges they face as they try to win your vote. From controversial legislation to lawmakers stepping down, fallout from the events in 2017 is shaping this year's outlooks in Texas politics. You can expect changes to key policies that affect your life, along with changes to the people who represent you at the state capitol and in Washington. KXAN's Wes Rappaport takes a look at issues and events that could shape 2018.
We're playing everywhere, and we're playing to win.
An excited Texas Democratic Party official told us about a month ago she was ready to show the strength of the left in Texas. A Republican that same day told me the GOP lineup looks better.
We're confident that Republican values and Texas values align perfectly, and that Texans will continue, as they have been for the past 20 years, electing Republicans.
Analysts say this year may bridge the gap.
2018 doesn't look to be the year Texas turns blue in any meaningful way. It may well turn out to be the year that the Democrats at least begin to get off the mat a little bit.
Jim Henson with UT's Texas Politics Project says big national issues have a big impact in the Lone Star State.
Continued conversation about illegal immigration and border security in Texas and how Texas as a state squares its relatively mixed position in that debate.
And Henson says keep an eye on the budget, especially when it comes to Hurricane Harvey.
We know that the day the legislature steps into session in January of 2019, there are going to be some big overhanging bills to pay that were deferred last time as a result of the efforts that they needed to make to balance the budget in 2017. Harvey is going to make that worse, and we don't know exactly what the impact of the most recent discussion and changes in Washington, D.C. on taxes are going to be.
If last year taught us anything, it's that we can't predict the future. That will be up to voters. Nearly 20 lawmakers announced they won't run for their current seat again. At the Capitol, I'm Wes Rappaport.
The Texas primary is less than 2 months away. Your deadline to register to vote comes up on February 5th. Early voting starts on February 20th and runs through Friday, March 2nd. Election day is Tuesday, March 6th. Joining us now for perspective, we have Alana Rocha from the Texas Tribune and Sherry Greenberg, a former state representative who's now with the LBJ School of Public Affairs. Welcome.
Thank you.
I think a lot of Texans don't even know that there is an election coming up in March. You know, what are some of the issues that could push those people to the polls?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that there is an election in March, because primaries are important, and particularly in a state such as Texas, where we have one party that is very dominant. There are many districts where the primary, for all intents and purposes, is the election. So pay attention. If it's a district, let's say, for state representative that has been drawn in such a way, or is in an area that is so predominantly, and in this case, Republican, let's say, then the primary really predicts the election. Or if it's in a district that is so predominantly Democratic, then the primary really predicts who's going to win. There may not even be a challenger in the general, or if so, somebody who, for all intents and purposes, doesn't have a chance. So, first and foremost, keep in mind that the primary could be, in reality, the election, the final election.
Right.
That should draw you to the polls just for the get-go.
Right.
Any issues you see that would push people that normally wouldn't vote to get to the primary?
Well, you know, we have a story this week on our website just about the number of women running. You have 8 vacancies from, 8 retirements from our Texas congressional delegation. And so, we're in the midst still of this Me Too movement. And so maybe, some voters are saying, maybe particularly female voters are saying, hey, maybe let's get a little more women, a few more women into those seats, which a few, especially the one out, Beto O'Rourke's vacant seat is likely to be a woman appointed there. That's definitely an issue. Hurricane Harvey and the handling of that along the Gulf Coast. And then possibly the Trump effect, but, remains to be seen. A lot of these, open seats, too, have attracted a lot of candidates. So, as Sherry says, I mean, the primary could be the race.
Yeah, you've done this before. What are candidates having to do right now to get the interest of voters?
So right now, it's difficult because a lot of voters don't know about the primary. It's not as difficult as it was a few weeks ago during the holidays, but right now, candidates really need to be out there hitting the trail. As a candidate, you're going to, unless you are self-funding your election, you're going to have to be dialing for dollars, as we say, or asking for money, really raising that money, and also asking people for their votes. You cannot assume anything in an election. You have to actually ask people for their votes. And beyond that, getting your message out. The primary March, and it doesn't really matter if you're running for Congress or for state rep or state senate, whatever the race, that is around the corner. So this is really it. Early voting will be here before you know it. And
February 20th, I think.
That's right. Yeah. And so people think of Election Day, or E-Day as we used to call it. No, now we have like E-Week, a couple of weeks of voting. So there's no longer just an election day. And so you have to really back up everything and key your campaign to when early voting starts. And that means you have to be really hard on it right now.
You mentioned the Trump effect. I mean, how realistic is that? We've been talking about it for the last year, but are we really going to see that take effect here in Texas?
It just depends. I mean, you know, people will kind of measure how they feel and how their situation is under him and the different changes he's made, but it's not smart to try and predict anything considering the 2016 election and just different developments since then.
What do you think?
And I think it's so specific to, again, the particular race. So in a particular race for, let's say, a state rep, a smaller district, in a particular district, you may see that, but that doesn't mean you're going to see it in all districts or statewide in a congress, you know, in a race for state senate, for instance, or in a race for United States Senate. So you have to be very careful and very specific to looking at the particular race to see if there's going to be a Trump effect.
And the issues in your area. I mean, look at some of the way these districts have been redrawn. You know, for instance, now vacant Lamar Smith, or soon to be vacant his district. I mean, it's South Austin down to San Antonio, some of the Hill Country. I mean, there's more diverse districts drawn and varied, but you know, you just have to look at the issues in those. I mean, that one has 4 Democrats and I think 18 Republicans running. So.
Right, and the Roger Williams district, he is an incumbent, but it is another race where you have a lot of people running, and it is another one of those districts that spans a lot of diverse territory.
You also touched on the Me Too movement. I mean, what are we going to see out of this?
I don't know that there'll be a lot of campaigning. I don't know necessarily from women talking about that as far as, you know, don't elect a man because of that. But I think that it is empowering women and getting them out there to run and wanting to kind of take control. I mean, it's a, you know, you see one man fall in this era that we're in right now, and you wonder when the next is. And so I think that a lot of women feel empowered to run and get to Congress and maybe change the culture.
And yes, I agree. I don't think that you'll see overt campaigning on this, but I think that it has encouraged women to run. And we've seen this before, too. Remember the Year of the Woman and back in the 90s. So we have seen this before, where you will have some type of incident or focusing event or events that encourage women to run. And I do think that that is the case here.
You know, a lot of these races are packed with a lot of candidates, so, you know, runoffs are probably going to happen. You know, what races do you see as being those competitive, possible runoff races?
Well, I think the first measure is going to be, you know, campaign finance reports are due January 15th. And I think it's then that we're going to see who's a viable candidate. Not only name recognition, I mean, you have some state officials, you know, former Texas Water Development Board, I think down in Farenthold's district, who's running, so who has some name recognition perhaps in that area. But, you know, I think depending on what those campaign finance reports to see who's actually viable to run, that'll be a determinant.
Yes, and that's why I was saying dialing for dollars is really important now. Raising that money to show that you are a viable candidate is very important. If you look at some of these districts in races such as Williams, there are a lot of people running, but who are actually going to turn up both as far as the Democratic primary, where you have several, and the Republican side as viable candidates, particularly in a race like that. You're running against an incumbent, so on the Democratic side, who of those people, you know, are going to be seen as really viable? Is there a chance for runoff on the Democratic side? Yes, but I think it depends on getting the money and having the money to run a real campaign. You know, typically when you see several people have filed in a race for a primary, you'd say, well, you're going to have a runoff, but not always. It depends on having the money to be viable and to get your message out, and let's face it, on the abilities of the candidates and their campaigns.
You missed it all?
Do I miss what at all?
Having to ask people for money and for votes and everything.
You know, there's a lot of the facets that certainly one doesn't miss, such as, you know, dialing for dollars. On the other hand, I actually loved walking door to door. You know, I loved getting out there and meeting people and hearing about the issues that were important to them. And so, sure, that's something that I think I do miss and that I really enjoyed about campaigning.
And then getting to take those concerns to the Capitol.
Yes, yes, yes. Trying to actually, exactly. You're meeting people, you're hearing what their concerns are, and then actually making a difference for them. And I think that for me personally, those were some of the moments that I remember the most when I you know, filed legislation because of the concerns of people, or even maybe one person. And then you see those constituents later, or even that individual later, and you may not have even met that person, and he or she would say, I was the one who, you know,
benefited,
called you about that, or whatever, and thank you. And so that was certainly meaningful.
Great perspective, Sherry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alana.
Thank you.
I was really, really mad. Because of that, a lot of innocent people died.
She survived the Sutherland Springs shooting by hiding behind a pew. Let's see why what she's doing now could protect others from having to face a gunman. A woman who survived the shootings in Sutherland Springs Church filed a legal claim to push the government to fix mistakes that allowed the shooter to buy firearms. Maggie Vidal hid behind a pew when the gunman opened fire. Bullets hit her in the back and in the leg. Right now, she's getting daily therapy at a nursing center in Floresville. She and her family filed a claim against the Department of Defense and the United States Air Force. That's after the Air Force admitted it never reported the shooter's criminal record to the FBI, allowing him to pass criminal background checks when he went to buy guns.
I'm hoping and praying nothing like this will ever happen, you know, for the government and the military to do their job, you know, from this happening again.
Vidal hopes her legal claim will push leaders to investigate their procedures to prevent future mistakes. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. Stay tuned for Meet the Press coming up at 9. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.